So advancing lifeguard data collection, these are the results from an international survey we did last year. Again, my name is William Koon. I am a PhD student at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, and also worked as a professional ocean lifeguard in California for over 10 years. By way of just conflict of interest, I am paid by both public and private organizations to consult on lifeguard data collection, but that doesn't influence the research that comes out of the Beach Safety Research Group. Okay, so here are, this is the results from the published study, and I just dropped a link into the chat so you can access more information from this talk, either from reading the published research study or from the blog, which kind of reviews everything that we did in, more of a simple language. So the motivation and background of the work that we did, lifeguard data collection practices vary wildly by region, nationally, and internationally, right? And so, two different lifeguard organizations that are 5 kilometers away from each other have different practices. And then when you spread that out to across countries, that's very different. And then internationally, of course, it's very different. The other thing that was interesting is that, lifeguard data collection is a very common barrier to research. And so all of these papers are published scientific research articles, which somewhere in their paper actually cited flaws with lifeguard data collection as inhibiting the research that was going on. So there's lots of examples from all over the world of researchers who were doing some project and they weren't able to do it fully because the lifeguard data that was collected either wasn't accurate or it was missing or was collected in a way that was unreliable or stuff like that. There's very minimal formal study on lifeguard data collection. So there's one paper from 2006 that Ann Williamson from here at UNSW did. And when you compare that to, EMS, paramedics, people in hospitals that are working, either scribes, doctors, or nurses, or police, there's a ton of literature out there on the different methods and techniques of how those industries collect data. And then lastly, of course, there was a big desire to improve lifeguard data collection. So our aims in this project were to basically figure out how lifeguards around the world are collecting their information and then what information that they're actually collecting. And then the secondary aim was to identify some areas for improvement and make recommendations. It is important here to recognize that, at no point when we were talking about planning this study, did we say, oh, our goal is just to say that all lifeguard data is bad? Instead, we were actually quite interested in just doing a survey to see what's out there and how can we go on to improve that. Okay, so what we did is we surveyed lifeguard managers, leaders, and chiefs. We sent out an electronic survey that had several different questions, and we intentionally sought to get the responses from beach lifeguard service providers. So not a union, not an association, not the competition team. We wanted the decision makers who actually were implementing or not implementing different strategies. This next slide is not intended to be legible. Basically, these are all the results. We figured out, how lifeguards were recording beach conditions, what type of beach conditions they were collecting. We talked a lot about rescue definitions and what a lifeguard agency meant by rescue, how people were doing crowd counts, mostly just looking out the window and guessing. And then we asked several questions on the lifeguard leader's opinion. So how accurate do you think your data is? How do you think you can improve? How does your staff do? That sort of thing. Again, this slide isn't necessarily intended to be legible. This is just to say that in our results, there was massive variability. So in a nutshell, lifeguards around the world are doing different things all over the place. They're collecting different information in different ways, okay? This is important though. When we ask the lifeguard leaders, so these are chiefs and managers and supervisors, what data do you wish that you would have? These were the responses. The first one is rescued person demographic. So how old is the person, the gender, where do they come from, right? And this information is critical to develop an epidemiological profile of who's getting in trouble at a certain beach. Which is the first step in developing a robust, prioritized intervention strategy. So if you need to do some education, some beach education, it gets way more effective if you know who you need to deliver that intervention to, right? The next is rescue severity. And so this came out in several comments by the lifeguard chiefs, is that there's a difference between a lifeguard paddling out on the paddleboard and assisting someone in who's mostly fine, but just kind of needed to ride back to shore, and the rescue where, you know, the lifeguard swims out and dives down and pulls the victim, you know, up by their hair. So the severity of different rescues is a topic that came up quite significantly. So I'm going to pause this other one. Hang on. Let's see. Apologies. Okay, and then the last one was just getting accurate time and location data. And this, again, is information that the lifeguard managers and leaders wanted to augment their current practices with. We asked what the biggest challenges were, and this came up multiple times, that, you know, training staff and that human element was always a challenge. Crowd count methodologies, which there was just a session on, came up several times. Inconsistency in methods and definitions. So again, that definition issue. And then, of course, the time that it takes to record information. And then the last one is data accuracy. So as you're looking at the stats at the end of the month, is what you're looking at an accurate reflection of what actually happened on your beach. Okay, so we took all of this information, and the authors of this paper, who came from all over the world, you know, Brazil, Portugal, United States, Australia, New Zealand, we kind of put our heads together and said, okay, what does all this mean? You know, what kind of comments can we make towards lifeguard data collection in the community? And these were the three big issues. So standardized definition, time-stamped activity data, and technology. So the first, standardized definition, and what we mean by this, well, first, this is not a new issue. Scientific research again and again and again that has to do with lifeguard data, they say standardized definitions are a critical, you know, way for us to improve the research. So it's been cited multiple times. It's actually the closing recommendation of the Science of Beach Lifeguarding book. So yeah, this is not a new issue. What we mean by standardized definitions: uniform case definition. So when I say rescue in Huntington Beach, California, do you understand and log the same thing as a lifeguard in Florida, Hawaii, the UK, New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, etc.? The second piece is, what data points should we collect? So there is a massive problem with one lifeguard organization collects one sort of information, another lifeguard collects another sort of information. That makes combining those data very difficult. Okay, now more into our realm today of the technology piece. Recording time-stamped activity and the associated metadata is absolutely crucial for robust analysis. So recording time-stamped data, and what I mean by that is a single event has a timestamp and then all the information that's associated with that event. Then when something else happens, that's another data point. That allows for statisticians and nerds like me to do robust analysis. The other thing that it allows for is linkage to other systems. Okay, so I'll show you kind of what I mean by that. If you show me your stats and you say, oh, on Thursday we had 2 rescues, on Friday we had 1 rescue, and Saturday we had, 8 rescues. If this is what your statistics look like, this is helpful, but it's really limited in the research potential of what we can do with it. What I mean by time-stamped activity is something like this. So this is an example of 10 minutes of lifeguard activity from Newport Beach, California in 2015. So you can see that there's a timestamp, there's what the lifeguard did, a public contact, where it was, and then all the other information. And this keeps going, right? So we can add weather information and ocean condition information and all sorts of other stuff. This sort of data set is how we do really robust statistics to determine likelihood of increased risk and that sort of thing. Now, you might look at this, and if you're not doing something like this already, you might have an exploding head going, that's crazy, how could we do this? And that kind of streamlines into the third recommendation and the subject of our conference today, which is technology. So if we can boil kind of this intro presentation down to just a few things, there's 3 things that we see as the goal of technology-based data collection. One is should reduce the time and lifeguard workloads. Technology in this space should not become a greater job or a more intense job than what the process already is. And it's not logical. It's not a step, too far to say most people are doing paper-based data collection. A transition to an electronic system will likely be easier and prevent, more work from happening. Second is that a technology-based solution needs to provide timely updates to decision makers. Now, I know of lifeguard agencies in California that don't have access to their data until a month or 2 months later, when all that stuff, all those paper files are collated into an Excel file. So as a decision maker, timely information, looking back and saying, what did we do this afternoon? What did we do yesterday? That's going to help that decision maker, that leader, make a decision about today, tomorrow, the next day, and communicate, information to the public. Third is that these data collection systems should be linked to other systems. And what I mean by that is that where reliable weather and ocean monitoring systems already exist, lifeguards do not need to be collecting beach ocean weather data, right? If there's a weather station somewhere near your beach, that's recording time-stamped data in a much more accurate and consistent fashion than the lifeguard looking out the window and going, nah, it's kind of nice, right? So these kind of three principles should be the overarching goal of lifeguard data collection technology. Now, of course, there are some challenges. Things can be expensive. Now, technology is changing quite rapidly. I'm sure that we're going to hear a little bit about some of these challenges in the presentations that are coming up. One is who's watching the water. So this is a picture of a lifeguard using a tablet. We can't see from this picture, but are his eyes watching the water or are his eyes on the tablet? So, trying to figure out, as frontline lifeguards, either standing in lifeguard towers or, intended to be watching the water, if we give them a tablet, are we now causing them distractions, right? So balancing that struggle is going to be something that the community and the profession has to come up with. And last is, some people just don't like technology and don't want anything to do with it. So taking advantage of those early adopters and, those data champions and those technology champions are going to be important. And at every lifeguard agency, you are going to have folks who just don't want to do it. This is the way we've always done it, and it's worked okay so far is a phrase that we hear often. So confronting more of that human socio-political element is going to be a big challenge as well. Okay, that's all I have. If you want to chat more,